The boat's engine cut out with a sputter, and for a moment there was nothing but the soft lapping of water and the hiss of wind in the mangroves. "This is it," Ravi said, standing at the edge of the wooden deck. "Welcome to nowhere." Tanvi hoisted her backpack with a grin. "Exactly what we came for." The 5 friends, Ravi, Tanvi, Neil, Ariv, and Meera, had planned this trip for months. A 3-day wilderness retreat into the restricted zone of the Sundarban forest. No cell towers, no tourists, just ancient trees, salty air, and the feeling of being completely off the grid. They had secured a local guide, Mohan, who dropped them just inside the border. After that, it was all on them. Ravi had studied topographic maps. Ariv brought the survival gear. Neil had packed enough food to feed a search party. But as the jungle loomed ahead, even Meera, who claimed she wasn't scared of anything, hesitated. "Do you hear that?" she asked. Tanvi frowned. "I don't hear anything." Exactly. There were no birds, no insects, no monkeys, just silence. They hiked for 2 hours through thick, humid air. Roots twisted like sleeping snakes beneath their boots. Red ants patrolled tree trunks like soldiers. The canopy above blocked out the sun, painting everything in a strange green haze. Neil stopped abruptly. "Guys!" They turned. He pointed to a tree. A mark had been carved into it, rough, angry slashes forming a strange pattern. A triangle within a circle. 3 dots beneath. "What is that?" Ariv asked. "Probably a trail marker," Ravi said. "Doesn't look like any I've seen," Neil muttered. They kept moving. By evening, they reached a small clearing beside a slow-moving stream. They pitched their tents in a semicircle, built a fire, and passed around protein bars and water bottles. Ariv pulled out his DSLR and snapped shots of the darkening forest. Tanvi and Meera sat close, whispering about urban legends of the Sundarban, of vanished researchers, local banshees, and spirits that took the shape of tigers. Neil stared into the fire, silent. "What's with you?" Ravi asked. Neil finally spoke. "Someone followed us today." Everyone froze. I heard footsteps behind me. Twice. When I turned, no one. "It's the jungle, bro," Ariv said. "Echoes, birds, branches." "No," Neil interrupted. "I know what footsteps sound like. This wasn't an animal." That night, Ravi woke with a start. The fire had gone out. His tent was soaked in dew. And something moved outside. He sat up, heart pounding, listening. A whisper. So faint, he thought it might be wind. Except it wasn't in the trees. It was near his ear. "Go back." He stumbled out of the tent. No one else stirred. But across the clearing, just between the trees, he saw it. A figure. Not moving. Not speaking. Just standing. Watching. Ravi blinked. It was gone. He told no one. But he wasn't the only one who saw something that night. And it wouldn't be the last. Meera woke up gasping. The inside of her tent felt suffocating, stale, humid, and damp. For a moment, she thought she was drowning. She threw off the sleeping bag and crawled out into the morning haze, her forehead slick with sweat despite the early hour. Tanvi was already outside, crouched over the fire pit, trying to rekindle a flame. "You okay?" she asked, glancing over. Mira nodded, but her voice was dry. Bad dream. Same. They looked at each other, and without another word, they both understood. They hadn't just dreamed something. They'd felt it, heard it, breathing inside the tents. Not theirs. Something large, patient, watching. Ravi, Neil, and Arif joined them shortly after. No one spoke about the night. Ravi looked pale. Arif kept checking the battery on his camera. Neil didn't meet anyone's eyes. Breakfast was quiet. The stream gurgled nearby, and the trees swayed gently, but something felt different. Like the jungle itself had shifted while they slept. The shadows didn't fall the same way. The air didn't feel as fresh. The usual chorus of insects and birds was still absent. Too quiet. That's when Neil noticed it. Where's my food pack? Ravi looked up. What? My pack. The one with all the protein bars, trail mix, jerky. I left it right by my tent. They searched the camp. Gone. No wrappers, no crumbs, no drag marks. As if it had simply vanished. Arif frowned. We're in the jungle. Maybe an animal. Animals leave signs, Neil snapped. Even monkeys. But there's nothing. Nothing touched. Nothing disturbed. Ravi rubbed his temples. We'll ration what's left. We're still good for a couple of days. Neil didn't respond. He just kept staring at the trees, as if daring them to blink. They decided to explore the area before the sun reached its peak. Staying in one place too long was a bad idea. If something was watching them, they didn't want to be predictable. Ravi led with the compass and map, and they kept within a 1-mile radius of camp. As they moved deeper into the trees, the forest floor darkened. Roots rose like ribs from the ground. Tangled vines hung from the canopy like limp nooses. Tanvi stopped suddenly. Did you hear that? Everyone froze. A soft click-click noise, like a fingernail tapping wood, echoed ahead of them. Then a rustle. Then silence. They crept forward carefully. The trail opened into a strange grove, trees spaced too evenly, bark stripped from some of them, as though clawed. At the center stood a wooden totem, almost human-shaped, but with no face. Just holes where eyes should be. And on the totem, carved roughly in Bengali script, "Do not forget your name." They returned to camp disturbed, but trying not to show it. That's got to be some local spiritual marker, Arif said. Maybe tribal. An offering point or warning site. But why that phrase? Mira asked. Don't forget your name? What does that even mean? No one answered. Later, while the others rested, Ravi and Tanvi filtered water by the stream. I saw something last night, Ravi confessed, breaking the silence. Tanvi's hands paused mid-scoop. What? Someone. Or something. Just past the trees. It was standing there. Watching. Tanvi nodded slowly. You're not the only one. That night, they burned a larger fire. No one wanted to sleep, but exhaustion eventually took over. And once again, the jungle stirred. Mira woke first, and this time she didn't panic. She lay perfectly still, listening. There it was again. Breathing. Heavy. Wet. Just beyond her tent wall. Then a scratch. Slow. Deliberate. It moved along the outside of the tent, brushing against the fabric so lightly it made her skin crawl. And then came a voice, not loud, but right by her ear. Mira. She bolted upright and unzipped the flap, but nothing was there. Nothing except for a handprint in the dirt. Not human. Too many fingers. Morning brought no comfort. Neil was gone. His tent had been unzipped neatly. His boots left behind. Arif found a small, torn scrap of his shirt snagged on a tree branch 15 feet up. Ravi scanned the trees, the stream, the trail. No footprints. Mira was crying now. Tanvi tried to calm her, but her own hands were shaking. No animal could have taken him like that, Arif said flatly. It wasn't an animal, Ravi said. It was whatever's been following us since we got here. They packed fast. What little food they had left was stuffed into Tanvi's bag. The plan was to hike back to the river and contact Mohan. Even if they had to wait a day, it was better than staying another night. But when they reached the trail, it was gone. Not overgrown, not blocked, just gone. The trees had shifted. They swore the stream had been to their left before, now it was behind them. The sun hung high, but offered no direction. The jungle had rearranged itself. Arif turned in a slow circle. No, this isn't possible. This is not where we came from. Ravi checked the compass. It spun in circles. This is wrong, Tanvi whispered. We're trapped. Then, from the trees ahead, a voice. Low, drawn out. Nail. Mira screamed, and the forest answered back with silence. Ravi had been in plenty of dangerous situations, storms while trekking in the hills, lost equipment in the highlands, even a snakebite scare in Meghalaya. But nothing compared to the fear he felt now. The jungle had changed, not gradually, suddenly, as if it had decided to. The path they'd followed for hours? Gone. The landmarks, bent trees, moss-covered rocks, the narrow stream they crossed earlier, all replaced with dense green walls and endless, suffocating undergrowth. It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. They tried retracing their steps, but after an hour, they ended up back at the same clearing. The fire pit from last night. Mira stared at it, eyes wide. We moved away from this. How are we back? Arif dropped his bag and kicked at the ashes. This isn't just some, we got lost situation. The jungle is looping us. Tanvi looked at Ravi. What now? Ravi was pale. We set up camp again. We need to rest. Think. Moving in circles when we're exhausted will just make things worse. And Neil? Mira asked quietly. No one had an answer. That night, no one slept. They sat around the fire, clutching mugs of hot water, ears straining for the faintest noise beyond the tree-line. Every now and then something rustled. Something breathed, but it never showed itself. Arif turned on his camera and began filming quietly. If we die out here, someone should find this. Don't say that, Tanvi snapped. He kept filming. Maybe they'll find this footage. Maybe Neil's already out there somewhere, watching us through the trees. Mira got up and walked into her tent, trembling. Sometime past midnight, the fire dimmed to glowing coals. That's when the voices started again. not whispering this time. Chanting. Soft. Repetitive. Like a lullaby sung by something that had never been human. Ravi reached for his flashlight and pointed it toward the trees. A dozen figures stood at the edge of the clearing, motionless, dark, eyes gleaming faintly, silver in the firelight. Then they vanished, not fled, vanished. No footsteps, no rustle, just gone. Morning light brought no comfort. Mira was gone, her tent still zipped, sleeping bag undisturbed. But her boots sat at the edge of the fire pit, pointing toward the trees. A small folded piece of paper was tucked inside one. Ravi unfolded. One word, scratched in trembling strokes. Remember. They didn't speak for hours. What could they say? Two of them gone. No way out. No direction. And now notes? Tanvi clung to her necklace, murmuring a prayer under her breath. Arif stood at the edge of the clearing, camera lowered, gaze locked on a distant vine that seemed to sway with no wind. Ravi finally broke the silence. We can't keep waiting. Tanvi looked up. For what? For it to come to us. He pulled the compass from his pocket again. It was still spinning, but slower now, as if trying to choose. We go north. Always north. Even if the land loops, we'll track it by the sun. If the sun isn't lying too, Arav muttered. But they agreed. They packed what little gear remained and set off, stepping over Mira's boots like graves. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. The jungle made time slippery, heavy. The trees grew taller, twisted at odd angles. Some had carvings now, not letters, but faces. Elongated, screaming, some smiling far too wide. Arif began mumbling to himself, reciting what sounded like GPS coordinates over and over. Tanvi clutched Ravi's arm tighter. Every time they passed another tree with eyes. Then the trees opened suddenly, another clearing. But this one wasn't theirs. This one had structures. Wooden poles, crumbling shrines, broken stone slabs half buried in vines. An old watchtower leaning slightly, swallowed by moss. It was a village, or had been. Now it was empty. They approached cautiously. Arif raised the camera again, filming everything. This wasn't on any map, Ravi said, scanning the crumbling huts. It shouldn't be here. Tanvi knelt beside a small altar. Dried blood caked the surface, and carved into the stone, the same symbol Neil had seen before. A triangle inside a circle, 3 dots beneath. I saw this on the tree, Tanvi whispered. Arif panned the camera toward the largest hut and froze. What is it? Ravi asked. He turned the display around. The camera had captured something none of them had noticed. A figure, standing just behind one of the huts, watching. But when they turned, nothing was there. Just wind, just vines, just silence. They didn't linger. As the sun dipped, they ran until they couldn't run anymore. They didn't speak of the village. They didn't speak of the figure. They didn't speak of the chanting that now echoed in the back of their heads even while awake. They set up camp in a tight circle, too tired to think. Ravi sat with his back against a tree, knife in hand. Tanvi laid her head on his shoulder, and Arif recorded a short message into his camera. If anyone finds this, don't come here. Not just because it's dangerous, but because it remembers you. Once it knows your name, you're already part of it. As they slept, the jungle closed in. Leaves rustled without wind. Roots shifted, and a faint voice whispered from somewhere beneath the soil. Only one leaves. When Tanvi opened her eyes, the jungle looked different. Brighter somehow. Warmer. Birds chirped in the distance, and the morning sun filtered through the canopy in soft gold ribbons. It was beautiful, too beautiful. She sat up slowly. Ravi was gone. So was Ariv. So was the fire pit, the sleeping bags, the backpacks. And the trees, they were standing in perfect lines. Symmetrical. Unnatural. Ravi, she called out. Only birds answered. She rose to her feet, heart pounding. Ariv. Nothing. Then a giggle. Soft. Childlike. It echoed from beyond the nearest tree. Tanvi turned slowly. Just past the tree line, a little girl stood barefoot in the underbrush. Her dress was white, but stained with earth. Her eyes were large and glassy. Tanvi blinked. The girl vanished. Meanwhile, Ravi woke up to the sound of water dripping. He was in a hut. Wooden walls. Thatched roof. A single open window where beams of sunlight slipped in. He sat up too quickly, his vision spinning. Tanvi called out. No answer. Ariv. He staggered to the doorway, only to realize this was the same village. The one they'd found the day before. But it was restored. Huts stood tall. Shrines gleamed in sunlight. Smoke rose from somewhere in the distance. The smell of cooked rice filled the air. Then he heard footsteps. Ravi ducked behind a clay urn just as a group of people passed. They were dressed in white robes. Men and women. Silent. Eyes downcast. Moving in synchronized, slow steps toward the central altar. They didn't see him. They didn't look like they could. As if he was invisible. Or worse, not really there at all. Ariv's experience was different. He woke in the same clearing they had camped in, but the fire was blazing, the tents were brand new, and he felt calm. Too calm. His camera sat beside him, battery full, memory card unreadable. He stood and called for Ravi and Tanvi. No answer. He turned slowly and stopped breathing. Across the fire, sitting on a log, was Neil, looking exactly as he had the day they'd entered the jungle. Smiling. Hey, Neil said casually, like nothing had happened. You look like hell. Ariv backed up. This isn't real. Neil tilted his head. Why not? You're dead. I never said that, Neil replied. You did. You assumed. I just left. Ariv's hand shook. Where did you go? Neil smiled wider. Where you're going. Back in the dream village, Ravi followed the white-robed figures from a distance. They gathered around the central altar, chanting something low and guttural. It wasn't Bengali. It wasn't Hindi. It sounded older. At the center of the altar was a large stone slab. On it, something lay covered in cloth. As the chanting grew louder, one of the robed figures pulled the cloth away. Beneath it, the lantern, cracked, burned, but pulsing with faint green light. The villagers knelt in perfect unison. Ravi took a step closer. An entire scene froze. Every figure stopped moving. Every sound stopped. Even the fire from a nearby torch hovered mid-flicker. Then, all at once, they turned their heads toward Ravi. Dozens of eyes. Blank. Knowing. And they whispered in perfect unison, "You were not invited." Tanvi ran. Branches slapped her arms, leaves tangled in her hair. That little girl had appeared 3 times now. Each time closer. Each time smiling wider. This wasn't a jungle anymore. It was a trap. The trees had twisted into each other. Roots crossed over paths like veins. Everything looked the same, green, wet, endless. Then she tripped. Hard. Her hands landed in mud, knees scraped by stone. And right in front of her, carved into the ground, "Do not forget your name." She gasped. The same phrase from the totem. The same one that haunted her dreams. "Tanvi," a voice whispered behind her. She turned. Nothing. Then the girl appeared again, standing just inches away. She reached out a hand and whispered, "Come back to us." Ariv closed his eyes. "This isn't real," he muttered. "This isn't real. This isn't." "Real is just memory wrapped in belief," Neil said. "And yours is fracturing." Ariv looked around. The trees were glitching, pulsing, as if reality itself was running out of breath. "Why are you here?" Ariv asked. Neil shrugged. "Because you're finally starting to listen." "To what?" Neil stood. His voice turned cold. "To them." And from the trees behind him, a dozen shapes began to form. Tall, thin, with arms too long, and eyes like moons. Ravi ran from the village. The figures didn't follow, but their voices did. "You were not invited. You do not belong. You forgot your name." The words clawed at his ears as he burst back into the jungle, panting. Somehow, impossibly, he found Tanvi. She was on her knees, shaking, covered in dirt. "Tanvi," he yelled. She looked up, and for a moment, her eyes weren't hers. They were pitch black. Then she blinked, and they were brown again. "Ravi!" He grabbed her hand. "We need to find Ariv. Now." They moved through the jungle like hunted animals. Everything felt wrong. Every step echoed. Every breath tasted of rot. The forest had become a living thing, and it remembered them. They found Ariv near a dried stream bed, standing still. He turned slowly, face pale. "I saw Neil," he said. "He told me we're already dead." Ravi grabbed his shoulders. "You're not dead. You hear me? We're still here. Together." Tanvi wiped tears from her face. "We're getting out of this." But as they stood there, huddled, determined, the ground trembled. A whisper rose from the trees. "Then wake up." And the jungle screamed. The scream wasn't a sound. It was a pressure, like the sky had cracked open, and the jungle was sucking them in. Ravi fell to one knee, clutching his head, as the world around him twisted. The trees stretched taller, impossibly tall, swaying without wind. The roots beneath their feet pulsed, writhing like veins. Tanvi dropped beside him, ears ringing, eyes wide with panic. Ariv stood completely still. His eyes were fixed on his arm. "Guys," he whispered, "look." They followed his gaze and saw it. A mark, slowly forming beneath his skin. Not a bruise, not a cut, a glowing symbol, deep red, just beneath the surface, like it had been waiting to rise. A triangle inside a circle, 3 dots beneath. The same mark they'd seen on trees, stones, and the altar. Now it was in him. Ravi backed away. What the hell is that? I don't know, Arif breathed. It started burning after the scream. Tanvi lifted the edge of her shirt. Ravi, it's on me too. She had the same mark. Same placement. Left forearm. Ravi's heart pounded. He rolled up his own sleeve. Nothing. He looked at them both. Why me? Why don't I have it? Arif shook his head. Maybe you weren't chosen. Tanvi met Ravi's eyes. Or maybe you're already part of it. They didn't know where they were anymore. The jungle had changed again. The path behind them no longer led back to the ruined village. The sun above was stuck in eternal twilight, low and orange, casting long, stretched shadows that never moved. Arif's camera was dead. Their water bottles were nearly empty. Their food was long gone, and the mark pulsed beneath the skin like a heartbeat, growing warmer by the hour. At dusk, they found a clearing that felt less wrong than the others. There were no chanting voices, no breathing trees, just silence, too much of it. They built a fire and sat close, barely speaking. Tanvi leaned against Ravi's shoulder. Arif sat across from them, staring into the flames. Maybe the marks are a countdown, he said suddenly. Ravi looked up. To what? To becoming one of them. The villagers. The ones in white. Tanvi shook her head. No, we're not like them. We will be, Arif muttered, unless we find a way out. That night, Ravi dreamt of the girl. The barefoot child in white, with soil on her hands and blood at the corners of her mouth. She stood beneath a tree made of bones, her eyes glowing like coals. You shouldn't be here, she whispered. I know, Ravi said. She looked sad, but it remembers you. What does? She pointed upward, and Ravi followed her finger. To the sky. Except it wasn't the sky anymore. It was a face. A monstrous, ancient face, carved from the canopy itself. Eyes the size of rivers. A mouth that stretched across the horizon. Watching. Breathing. Don't forget your name, she said. Then the sky screamed, and Ravi woke gasping. Tanvi was gone. Ravi sat up, heart racing. Tanvi. Arif jolted awake beside him. What? They heard it at the same time. The sound of whispering. Then sobbing. From the trees. They grabbed their torches and ran. The jungle was a maze of pulsing light and flickering shadows. Branches curled like fingers. Roots rose like ribs. They followed the sound closer, then found her. Tanvi was on her knees in a ring of mushrooms, muttering something over and over. Don't forget your name. Don't forget your name. Don't forget your name. Her arm glowed brighter now. The mark had spread, up her shoulder, across her collarbone. Red and pulsing like molten metal. Ravi dropped beside her, shaking her. Tanvi, look at me. Her eyes snapped open, but they weren't hers. Pitch black. No whites. No iris. Just void. She smiled. You remembered. Then she collapsed. They carried her back to the clearing, laid her gently beside the fire. She didn't speak, but her eyes had returned to normal. She's still in there, Ariv whispered. For now, Ravi said. But the mark, it's spreading. We need to stop it. How? Ravi looked at the knife in his belt. Ariv followed his gaze. Don't even think about it, he said. You cut her, she bleeds out. You burn her, she screams, and we lose her forever. Then what do we do? Ariv was silent. Then he stood up. We go back to the altar. The next morning, they moved quickly. Tanvi could walk, but barely. Her skin burned to the touch. Her voice came in whispers. It's pulling me back. Ravi and Ariv took turns supporting her. The jungle resisted them at every step. Trees shifted. Trails dissolved. Once they walked in a circle for nearly half an hour, without realizing. But eventually, somehow they found it. The village collapsed again, just like the first time. Shrines broken, huts rotted, the altar cracked down the center. But the lantern was still there, still glowing, faint, but alive. Ravi stepped forward slowly. This is where it started. Ariv raised his camera, no power, but the lens still reflected. In the reflection, the altar was whole, and standing around it were the villagers, watching, silent, waiting. Ravi climbed the steps. He could feel the lantern's heat now, subtle like a fever. He reached for it. The fire inside flared bright green, and every tree in the jungle exhaled. Branches twisted, roots cracked, the earth shifted, and the villagers screamed, not with voices but with memory. Images filled Ravi's mind. The jungle swallowing an entire village. A ritual gone wrong. Names being erased. Souls being trapped in trees, in shadows, in silence. And above it all, the mark. The triangle. The circle. The 3 dots. It wasn't a warning. It was a seal. A cage. A countdown. Tanvi collapsed behind him. Her arm glowed like fire. Ariv shouted, "Do something." Ravi grabbed the lantern. It burned his skin, but he held on. And he whispered the only thing he could remember. Tanvi. The mark flickered. He shouted again. Tanvi. Her eyes fluttered. The villagers screamed again. The jungle roared. And then, light. The lantern shattered. A burst of green fire erupted, swallowing the altar, the clearing, the villagers. Ravi fell backward, landing hard. Then, silence. Real silence. For the first time in days. Tanvi's mark was gone. Faded. Her breathing slowed. Normal. Ariv collapsed beside her, crying with relief. And Ravi stared at the shattered lantern, knowing it was over. Or at least, paused. They didn't speak for a long time. Ravi sat in the ashes of the shattered lantern, staring into the crater where it had burned. His palms were scorched, trembling from the heat he'd barely survived. But the air around them was still now, almost normal. Tanvi slept beside Ariv, her chest rising and falling steadily. The mark had faded from her skin, and the fever had broken. Her hand no longer twitched with phantom pain. For the first time in days, the jungle sounded like a jungle again. Birds, wind, Insects. Life. Almost like it had released them. Almost. Arif stood at the edge of the clearing, camera dangling uselessly from his neck. No power. But, "I think I saw something," he said. Ravi looked up. When? When the lantern shattered. Just for a second, the sky changed. Ravi nodded slowly. "I saw it too. A face. A god. A memory older than language. A presence that wasn't just in the jungle, but was the jungle." Arif kicked at a vine near his boot. "You think we actually broke it? The thing holding the forest in that loop?" Ravi didn't answer. Instead, he stared at the shards of the lantern, still faintly warm, and said, "No." Arif raised an eyebrow. "I think we woke it up." They packed what they could carry. 2 water bottles, 1 protein bar. Arif had a knife. Ravi still had the compass, though it spun with an erratic rhythm. Tanvi woke groggy but aware. "I heard you," she whispered to Ravi as he helped her up. "In the fire. Calling me." "You came back," he said. She shook her head. "Only part of me." They didn't dwell on it. They walked west, or what they thought was west. The sun no longer followed the same rules. Sometimes it hovered in place. Sometimes it dipped, then rose again. At one point it split in two and hovered on opposite sides of the sky before merging again without explanation. Still they walked. The jungle no longer screamed, but it watched. And that was worse. After hours of trudging through mud and roots, they found the river again. At least, it looked like the same river, the one Mohan had dropped them near on the first day. Wide, dark, slow-moving. Dragonflies skimmed the surface. They followed its bend, hoping to spot the wooden dock. Tanvi gasped. "There, look." A wooden boat bobbed against the bank, half tide, half sinking. They rushed to it. No sign of Mohan. No footprints. But inside, under a plastic sheet, lay a radio still intact. Ravi grabbed it, flipped the switch. A static hiss. Then, click. "Anyone receiving, this is Patrol Unit Delta 2 over." Ravi's heart jumped. He pressed the button. "Delta 2, this is Ravi Bansal. We're stranded in the Sundarban interior. 2 companions. No food. Request evacuation. Over." Silence. Then, "Ravi Bansal, please confirm date and expedition code." Ravi blinked. "Date. It's Tuesday, March 25th. A pause. "Ravi Bansal, your expedition was declared missing. March 25th, last year. Please confirm. Over." Ravi's hand dropped. Arif and Tanvi stared. "What did he say?" Tanvi whispered, "We've been gone a year." The patrol unit found them the next morning. Real people. Guns. Radios. Helicopter. When the soldiers arrived, they stared at the 3 of them like they were ghosts. Gaunt. Dirty. Barefoot. Covered in scratches. But alive. Somehow alive. The soldiers helped them into the chopper. No one said much until they were in the air. Ravi watched the jungle fade beneath them. Tanvi clutched his hand tightly. Arif sat silent, staring at the camera in his lap. One soldier looked back. "You're lucky." Ravi didn't respond. The jungle didn't look smaller from above. It looked endless, and somewhere in the canopy, he saw a flicker of green flame. Only for a second, but it was there. They spent a week in the hospital. Tanvi slept almost constantly, murmuring in her sleep. Arav refused to eat anything not sealed in packaging. Ravi gave 6 different interviews to government officials who didn't believe anything he said. They asked about the lost time, but his answers mark they spent a week in the hospital. Tanvi slept almost constantly, murmuring in her sleep. Arav refused to eat anything not sealed in packaging. Ravi gave 6 different interviews to government officials who didn't believe anything he said. They asked about the lost time, but his answers, markings, chanting, ancient symbols, broken lanterns, only earned blank stares. One investigator leaned in quietly during the final session and whispered, "You don't have to lie. What did you really find out there?" Ravi smiled without humor. "What found us, you mean?" 3 days after their release, Arav vanished. No note, no trace. His apartment was undisturbed. All belongings intact. Camera missing. The last security footage showed him walking into a patch of woods at the edge of the city. He never came out. Tanvi broke down after hearing the news. She stayed with Ravi for 2 nights. They didn't talk about the jungle, only about Arav, his dry humor, his obsession with documentation, the way he could make people laugh even when they were too tired to move. On the 3rd morning, she asked, "Do you think it called him back?" Ravi didn't answer, because he didn't need to. A week passed. Tanvi went home to her family. Ravi stayed behind. Each night, he dreamed of the jungle, the chanting, the mark. He'd check his arm in the morning, still bare. But sometimes, he swore he could feel something beneath the skin. Itching, growing, waiting. And every so often in the dead of night, he'd hear a voice, low, childlike. "Do not forget your name." It arrived without warning. A padded envelope, no return address, dropped into Ravi's mailbox on a rainy Thursday morning. The handwriting on the label was unmistakable. Arav's. Ravi sat motionless in his apartment for 10 minutes, the envelope resting on the table like a sealed curse. Then, slowly, he tore it open. Inside was a USB drive. Black. Plain. No markings. He plugged it into his laptop and opened the only file it contained. Return.mp4. The video began with static, then a flash of green. It was handheld footage, Arav's camera, pointed at the jungle floor. Heavy breathing filled the audio. He must have been running. The camera tilted up, revealing the overgrown altar. Except it wasn't ruined. It was whole again. Candles burned along the edges. Villagers in white robes stood in a ring, chanting in a language that made Ravi's skin crawl. The camera zoomed in on a figure tied to the altar. Tanvi. Her eyes were closed. Her arms marked. The chanting grew louder. Suddenly, the image glitched, frame skipping, colors distorting, then cut to black. Ravi leaned forward. After a few seconds, the video returned. This time, it showed Arav himself, filming from a low angle, his face visible in the reflection of the lens. He looked hollow, tired, resigned. He spoke directly into the camera. "If you're watching this, I'm not coming back." Ravi's stomach twisted. "I went back," Arav continued. I thought I could understand it. Finish the story. But the jungle doesn't want to be understood. It wants to remember. And it wants us to remember it back. The camera shook as he laughed bitterly. I think it let us go on purpose. We were never lost. We were marked. He held up his forearm. The triangle. The circle. The 3 dots. It pulsed, glowing faint red. I didn't make it out. Not really. I think none of us did. We left pieces of ourselves in there, and now it's growing them like seeds. He looked up. Behind him, deep in the shadowy foliage, a figure moved. Something tall. Watching. He turned back to the lens. I don't know what's real anymore. But if you're still clean, if the mark hasn't returned, burn this. Now. The footage cut. Ravi sat in stunned silence. Then he rolled up his sleeve. Nothing. No mark. No glow. Just skin. But he didn't feel relief. He felt watched. That night, he dreamed again. This time, he wasn't in the jungle. He was in his own apartment, but something was off. The walls pulsed like flesh. The windows looked out onto black water instead of city lights. And in the center of his living room stood the altar. Tanvi lay on it, eyes open, whispering his name. The villagers surrounded her. One of them stepped forward, lifting the lantern. It wasn't broken anymore. It was waiting. Ravi stepped back, but his feet were rooted. The girl appeared, the barefoot one. She reached out and touched his hand. You watched the tape, she said. Now it knows you again. Then the lantern burst into green flame. Ravi screamed and woke. The next morning he called Tanvi. No answer. He tried again. Voicemail. Panic rising, he rushed across town to her apartment. The building was locked, but he convinced the doorman to let him up. He pounded on her door. Nothing. He called her name. Still nothing. Then he looked down and saw it. Mud. A single footprint, bare and wet, just outside her door. He backed away. His heart thundered, and in his mind, the voice returned. Only one leaves. Back home, Ravi did what Arav asked. He burned the USB drive in steel pot on his balcony, watched it melt and curl into black slag. Smoke rose in a thin, silent thread, but it didn't feel like closure. It felt like permission. That evening, as the sun sank behind the city skyline, Ravi sat alone in his room, staring at a blank page in his journal. He picked up his pen and began to draw. A triangle, inside a circle, 3 dots beneath. He didn't know why, but his hand moved on its own, and as the final dot was placed, his arm burned. He tore up his sleeve. The mark was back, brighter than before. The mark didn't fade. It throbbed beneath Ravi's skin, glowing softly even through his sleeve. It pulsed not with his heartbeat, but with something else. A rhythm not of his world. He sat in the dark, light off, blinds shut, listening to every creak in his apartment. The noises weren't from the building. They were inside the walls. Rustling, breathing, a sound like wet leaves dragging across tile. He hadn't slept in 2 days, because every time he closed his eyes, he woke up, not here but there, in the jungle. That night, a knock came at 2:03 a.m. He stared at the door for 5 full minutes before answering. No one was there. But at his feet, lay a folded piece of paper. Unmarked. No writing. He opened it. Inside, a map. Hand-drawn. Familiar. The shape of the river. The altar. The camp. And a red X marked deep in the trees. At the bottom, in the corner, 3 words. Last invitation. Come. Ravi slammed the door and locked every bolt. But it was already too late. In the morning, the mark was larger, now wrapping around his forearm like a growing vine. His reflection didn't look like him anymore. His eyes were darker, his skin pale. There was something faintly wrong in the way he moved. He didn't eat. Couldn't. The jungle had started whispering from the corners of rooms, from television static, from the hum of power lines. He called Tambi one last time. Voicemail. Then, in a shaking voice, he left a message. I think it's my turn. If I don't come back, tell them we were right. All of it. He left the phone on the kitchen counter and packed. The train to the Sundarban coast left at 7:50 a.m. Ravi didn't sleep on the ride. He stared out the window, watching the fields turn to forest, the roads narrow into dirt paths. By noon, he'd arrived at the same jetty where Mohan had dropped them over a year ago. It hadn't changed, but everything felt different. A small boat bobbed in the water, unmanned, old, but functional. He stepped in, started the motor, and let it glide upriver. As the trees rose taller around him, the compass in his hand spun violently, then stopped, pointing inward. Hours passed. The sun never seemed to move. He reached the familiar shore by dusk. The trail ahead had already reformed, roots curling aside, the path opening like a mouth. It had been expecting him. He stepped into the trees. The jungle embraced him, not with violence, but with recognition. The moss was softer, the wind quieter. The trees didn't shift or breathe. They watched. He walked for hours, following the map that was somehow already memorized. And then he reached it. The red X. A small clearing sunken slightly, surrounded by towering trees like cathedral columns. At the center, a stone mirror. He stepped closer. It wasn't glass. It was water. Still. Black. But it reflected perfectly. Except, the man in the reflection wasn't him. It looked like him, but older. Paler. Wearing white. With no eyes. And the mark carved deep across the chest. The reflection raised its hand. Ravi raised his in sync, except he didn't. He couldn't move. The reflection smiled and spoke. Come see. He fell forward, straight into the water. Except it wasn't water. It was memory. He landed back at the altar, but not broken this time. Whole. Alive. Villagers chanted around him, but this time they faced him. One by one they lifted their hands. Each had the mark. Each was him. Different versions. Different futures. All Ravi. And the jungle pulsed beneath them. It was not a place. It was a being. And it had chosen him to remember. The barefoot girl stepped from behind the altar. But she was no longer a child. Her eyes burned with ancient light. Her face shimmered with shifting features. You came, she said. The others fled. I had no choice. She smiled sadly. You always had a choice, but you chose to carry the memory. What do you want from me? to become what was forgotten. The altar cracked. Roots rose from the ground, wrapping his legs. The villagers chanted louder. The girl stepped forward, whispering the final words. Only one leaves, but the others remain forever. Ravi closed his eyes and saw everything. The ancient forest, the first ritual, the breaking of time, the cycle, the loop, each generation marked, each returning, each becoming part of the jungle's mind. He understood. The jungle wasn't haunted. It was remembering itself. Through him. And now, it was complete. Back in the city, Tanvi woke in a cold sweat. She rolled up her sleeve. The mark was gone. Completely. No scar. No burn. Just skin. She gasped. Then smiled. Not out of joy, but because she knew. Ravi had gone back, and he had stayed. A month passed. The story of Ravi Bunsel's disappearance barely made a ripple. A missing persons report, a few flyers, an article buried beneath celebrity gossip and politics. Another hiker lost. Another man who never came back. Only Tanvi knew the truth, and she could feel it every day growing. She had tried to live normally again, returned to work, ate regular meals, took her medication, laughed when people cracked jokes, but none of it stayed. The world outside had lost its edges. Lights flickered too long. People's voices echoed even when they didn't move their lips. Sometimes she saw vines creeping through sidewalk cracks that weren't there the day before. And always she felt it. The jungle. Not just in memory, but in presence. Following her. Watching her. Waiting for her to turn around and see it again. One morning, Tanvi woke to birdsong in her apartment. There were no windows open. No birds. She sat up slowly, heart already racing. On her nightstand sat a folded piece of paper. She hadn't put it there. Hands trembling, she opened it. One sentence. The forest knows you now. And beneath that a drawing. A triangle. A circle. 3 dots. But this time the ink bled. As if the paper were alive. She threw it away. Locked the door with furniture. Didn't sleep that night. But it didn't stop. The next day, she saw vines creeping down the hallway of her building. The day after, the power went out during her shower, only in her apartment. And on the 3rd day, her plants bloomed. All at once. Bright green. Too bright. Too fast. Even the one that had been dying for weeks, brown and brittle, now stood tall and lush, dripping with dew that smelled faintly of salt and rot. Like the mangrove roots. Like him. In desperation, she visited Arif's old apartment. It had been sealed since he vanished. Officially condemned. She broke in through the fire escape. Dust covered everything. But nothing was disturbed. Except the camera. It sat on the table. Pointed at the window. She pressed play. The screen showed nothing for a few seconds, just the city skyline. Then, the jungle. Not outside. Inside. Green tendrils crept across the glass. Leaves bloomed in fast motion. Trees appeared where buildings should be. And in the middle of it all stood a figure. Ravi. White-robed. Calm. Watching. He turned to the camera. And smiled. Tanvi dropped the device. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no. But she knew. He wasn't gone. He had become something else. Not dead. Not alive. But part of the memory the jungle held, and kept replaying. She ran home. Locked the doors. Paced. Screamed. And then on her bathroom mirror, fogged with no steam, a message appeared. Only one leaves. That night, she dreamed again. She was back at the altar. Ravi stood beside her, not speaking. The girl was there, smiling, holding a seed in her hand. "You can bury it," she said, "or you can eat it." Tanvi looked at Ravi. "Will it end?" He shook his head slowly. "It never ends, but it understands." She turned to the girl. "What happens if I eat it?" The girl leaned in close. "Then you'll finally remember who you were before the jungle forgot you." Tanvi opened her mouth. The seed dropped in. She woke up the next morning with soil in her mouth. Every mirror in her apartment was shattered. Every plant twisted to face her. And when she looked out her window, the city was still there, but in the reflection on the glass, the jungle swayed gently in the wind. And somewhere deep inside her chest, something began to whisper. It started with the dreams. Every night, Tanvi stood at the edge of the clearing, the altar before her, the villagers surrounding her. Their faces blurred, their chants low and rhythmic, vibrating deep inside her bones. Ravi stood beside her now, always beside her, but farther each time. He was fading, not from her memory, but from his self. She called out to him. He never answered, not with words, only with eyes, empty, watching, as if he was waiting for her to choose. By the end of the second week, the city had begun to warp around her. Not visibly, not to others, but she saw it. Bark forming beneath concrete, shadows of trees where there should be lamplight, birds flying patterns that matched symbols from the totems. A tree outside her window twisted into the shape of the triangle circle dots. And no matter how far she moved, how deep into the crowd she pushed, the jungle followed. It no longer needed roots to grow. It lived in her thoughts. She returned to the woods one last time. Not the Sundarban, just a patch of forest an hour outside the city. Still enough. She walked deep inside, past signs, past trails, past the reach of cell towers. There, in a quiet hollow surrounded by thorn brush, she sat and waited. Hours passed. Darkness fell. And then a whisper. Familiar. Tanvi. Her name, like wind through leaves. She opened her eyes. He was there. Ravi. But he didn't look like before. He shimmered, his outline blurring, bending. His body no longer fully human, not fully jungle. He knelt before her and offered a seed. Glowing green. Alive. You can still walk away, he said. She shook her head. No. You remember now. Tanvi looked up at the sky. The stars had changed. They formed the mark. A message. A gate. I never forgot, she whispered. I was just pretending. She took the seed. Swallowed it. No pain. No heat. Just silence. And then, everything. She saw every version of herself, every path she'd almost taken. Saw the villagers, the failed rituals, the old god beneath the roots, the eternal cycle. The jungle was not a place. It was a memory trap. A living consciousness built of every thought, every fear, every sacrifice left behind. And now it had her too, but not as prey, as witness. Back in the city, no one saw her again. Her apartment was sealed, her phone disconnected, her photos wiped from every social media platform, as if she had never been. Except in the woods, at the very edge of the Sundarban, where the mangroves whisper and the wind hums an old forgotten tune. Some say you can see her, wearing white, eyes dark, waiting by the river, and beside her, him, Ravi, both marked, both calm, both calling you to remember. And if you follow the path into the trees, you might hear it too, the whisper beneath the leaves, the chanting in the soil, and the question that never fades. Do you remember your name?